Good evening and welcome back to Coachable Moments. I'm your host, Pat GPT. I wanted to jump in and give you part two of Back Against the Wall. First, I want to shout out to Jamaica for leaving a message asking when I was going to release part two of this episode. And I definitely appreciate the support in listening to my videos. I definitely do not take that for granted. Really appreciate all the listeners. And so with that, we'll jump in to discuss what happened in part two of Back Against the Wall. So at this time, I have been repossessed. I've been foreclosed. I've been living in an abandoned home for the last almost 2 years now. And so at this point, I've gotten really good at listening to God's voice at this point. I'm distraction free. I have no distractions to prevent me from listening to his voice. So although this was a really trying time in my life, it ended up being one of the most blessed times for me looking back at it. And I would encourage anyone that's going through, a similar situation, may not be exact, but a tough time nonetheless. I would encourage you not to look at the enormity of how big the situation looks, but rather focus on what's being shown to you in that time, because there is a lesson in it for you if you pay attention. So again, I've been repossessed, I've been foreclosed, I'm standing in this abandoned house, and so things start to take a shift for me. I got a lead on a actual place to stay. And I went and took a look at this home, really nice home. It was like 5 or 6 miles from where I was staying at the time. And the gentleman that owned the home, he worked out of town, so it was almost like a family home. No one was using it. It was just sitting there. It was in really bad shape at the time as far as structurally it was fine, but there was a lot of just trash on the inside of it. I guess the previous people that lived there kind of destroyed it on their way out. So fast forward, just had a really good conversation with him, and he knew me out of the position that I held with the employer, and he, kind of took a liking to me and told me that, hey, you can just move in the house and start paying me whenever you get on your feet, basically, which at that point I was blown away at his generosity and, God's favor on my life to be able to provide me with a suitable home, with some cleanup, but suitable nonetheless, to the point that it was much better than where I was currently staying. So I ended up getting the home, and, I went there at the time. A young lady that I was seeing at the time ended up helping me clean the house, from top to bottom. Got all of the trash out. It was so many bags of trash that we had to remove from that house to make it suitable. But together we got it done. And after we removed all of the trash, it was just amazed at the quality of the home. It was a really well built, well taken care of property. And I felt really blessed to have that. It actually had electricity, running water, heating, air, all the windows were there. So it was a definite upgrade to my present situation. So, fast forward, I started working this job, and it was about a $30 an hour pay cut from what I was used to making, at my prior job. And so the money wasn't there. It took me a long time to really start to generate some funds. But once I started to accumulate a few dollars, I started getting some of the basics that I needed. I bought a washer, dryer, a new stove, and a stainless steel refrigerator. And, so things were moving in the right direction. I started to accumulate some new clothes, shoes. I was in a much better situation, so I started to get my kids more on the weekend and after school sometimes, because I had a really decent place for them to stay. So things were looking up. And so one weekend, a friend of mine, we, decided to go to New Orleans. We wanted to go see LeBron James play in New Orleans. That was my first time being able to afford to go and do something like that in a long time. So I was super excited about this opportunity. So that Friday came and we struck out to New Orleans and went down for the weekend, stayed, Friday, Saturday, came back that Sunday. And so after I dropped my friend off, I proceeded to go back to my house. And when I pulled up, it was kind of dark. It was after 7, 8 o'clock. So it was dark when I pulled in the driveway. So I get out and walk up to my door, the side door of the house that I was entering through the kitchen. And when I got to the door, I noticed the door wasn't closed. So I'm like, okay, this is different, And I thought back and I remembered closing my door. I remembered locking it and, pushing it back and forth to make sure that it actually held and that it was locked. So I remember doing that on my way out of town. And so with that, I felt as though, somebody had either came into my house or, something happened to cause the door to be partially open. So to my surprise, when I walked in and turned on the light switch, I had actually been robbed while I was out of town. So my stainless steel refrigerator was gone. My washer and dryer was gone. And the only thing that was left was the stove. I guess they ran out of room on the truck on the first trip and probably planned to come back and get the rest of it. But I had came back home. So, I walked through the house, went into my bedroom, and a lot of my clothes and shoes had been taken. So at this point, I'm just devastated because, finally to get some of my momentum back, start to reaccumulate some of the items that brought me comfort and some pleasure, to be violated like that was it was a shock to me, to the point that, I didn't feel safe staying in the house, but I had nowhere else to go at that point. So the whole night, I was up, I didn't sleep. I was just angered by the fact that somebody had violated my space and taken my things that I worked hard for. And so the next day, I woke up early. I was just frustrated and angry. I decided I was going to go get a U-Haul truck, and I was going to take everything that I had left and just take it to my parents' house. I gave my mother the stove. She needed a new stove anyway. So I gave her the stove and the mirror, the chair that I talked about on the previous episode. That's why I, put all of that stuff and all of my garden supplies, weed eaters, things like that. I just gave all that to my dad to make his housekeeping and yard upkeep easier. So I just really pretty much gave away everything else I had to my parents. And, the crazy part was like, so as I'm loading this U-Haul with my remaining items, I get a phone call from AT&T. And, at that point, I had pretty much given up on finding a nice job, a better paying job, because, I was living in Mississippi at the time, and there was really very few opportunities there that could match what I was making at the prior job. So I had spent so much time applying for roles all over the country. I mean, from state to state, I was putting in applications, didn't really care where it was. And just every day it was 15 or 20 thank you for your interest emails, but you were not selected for the role. So that's all I was getting every day, 15 or 20 of those. So as I'm loading the U-Haul truck, I get this call from AT&T, and they asked me if I was interested in a job in Birmingham, Alabama. And I was like, your timing is perfect. I'm definitely interested. Anything that can get me away from here, I'll do it. So They tell me, we need you to be in Birmingham. And at that point, it was like a couple of days from that phone call date. So, a couple of days I had to be in Birmingham to do what they called a job overview. They would just bring us in, tell us what the job was about. And then if we wanted to proceed with the interview process, then we could at that point. Or if we were not interested, we could just return to our homes and, move on to the next opportunity. So that was all fine. My problem was I was dead broke. I had $0 to my name, and I was trying to figure out how I was going to drive to Birmingham because my vehicle was repoed and I didn't have a reliable transportation to get me, 3 hours from my house. And the second part was, how was I going to afford gas and food to, drive 3 hours away, spend the whole day in Alabama, and then come back. So I just decided I was going to take the U-Haul truck, drive it over to my parents, drop off my stuff, and, trust that God was going to, provide an answer for all of that. So once I get to my parents' house, we get to talking about, what my next moves are going to be. And I told my parents that I had a potential job. I had a job overview rather, in Birmingham, but I didn't have a way to get there. And so my mother jumped in really quick, said, "No, take my car. You're going." So that was part A of the situation. That was resolved. So I knew how I was going to get there. I didn't know how I was going to get gas. And so later that day, there's some benefits to living in small town USA. Everybody knows everybody. So my mother had made some phone calls, and one of their longtime friends owned a gas station. And, she was talking to him about my particular situation. And he said, "Hey, tell Pat to come and gas up, just pay it back whenever he can and go to his interview." So that was how I got there. I mean, I went there, I filled my tank up, I drove all the way to Birmingham. And when I got there, I was a little under, half a tank. I had enough to get almost home, but I knew I was not going to make it home. So at that point, I wasn't worried about it. I just said, you know what? God got me that far, he'll get me home. So I go to the interview, or the job overview rather, and I was liking what I was hearing about the job. I felt like it was something that I could do, and I could see some upward mobility if I stayed with that job. And it was with AT&T, which is, secure company. I felt good about it. So after the interview, I told the guy that, I do want to proceed with the next step of the process and, be considered for employment for that role. So he took my information, and I got in the car, started on my way back home, and I get about 100 miles from the house, maybe a little bit more than that. And no gas light came on. So I'm sitting there freaking out at this point. I'm like, how in the world am I going to make it another 100+ miles and my gas light is on? I don't know anybody. I don't have a smartphone at the time. I've got a Nokia flip phone from Walmart that was a straight talk phone, if anybody's familiar with that. So I had prepaid minutes, and I was just trying to figure it out. How was I going to get home at that point? And I just, with my resolve, I just said, you know what, hey, I'm just going to drive as far as I can. Once it runs out of gas, I'll just try to call someone, a family member or a friend, and see if they'll come get me, and I get home that way. So as I'm driving, about 15 minutes goes by, and I get on this straightaway on the interstate. As far as you could see, it was just flat highway. And as I'm driving, I see this van on the side of the road. And as I got closer, I saw this elderly lady and a van full of kids. So I pull over. I could see, the flat tire, and she was trying to, jack the van up and change the tire. So I pulled over to give her a hand. Just, I thought, if it was my grandmother on the side of the road, I would want someone to stop and help her. So just doing my civic duty. And so I pulled over, and it took me about 2 hours to change this tire because she did not have the piece that would lower the tire from under the back of the van. So I literally had to go in with some wire cutters and cut this heavy duty cord string by string until I was able to get the tire off of the van. I was like pouring sweat. It was so hot that day. It was probably like 105 degrees on the interstate with no shade in sight. It was just me, the van, and my determination to get this tire off so I could get this lady and her grandkids back on the road. It was extremely hot, and the kids were just inside of the van. So I was motivated to push through and get this done. So anyway, I get the tire off and get her tire changed and get all the tools loaded back in the back of her van so that she could proceed. And I just told her to, drive carefully because it was the spare tire. It wasn't a full-size tire that she couldn't drive as fast as she could on the other tire. So just gave her some safety tips and, wished them on their way. So I go to my car to get in and proceed to drive home. So once I get in the car and start the car up, the lady knocks on the window, and it kind of startled me because, I was thinking that she was getting ready to drive off. But she walks up to my window, and I roll the window down, and she tries to stick this $20 bill in my car for helping her change the tire. And I was like, no, ma'am, I cannot accept that. I was like, I'm just doing what I would want someone to do for my mother or my grandmother. So I can't charge you for helping you. And I thanked her for it. Even though I knew I needed it, I just didn't feel right taking it. So I thanked her, and she started to walk back to her van. Now, in my mind, I'm like, fool, you need this gas money to get home. But I just didn't want to take it because I just wanted to do a good deed for her, not expecting anything back from myself. So she turns around and comes back, and she knocks again. I let the window down, and she's like, listen, she's like, I don't want to pay you for changing my tire. She said, but God wants me to give this to you. I don't know why. She said, but I have to give it to you. So if you want to put it in church Sunday or bless somebody else and give it away, I don't care what you do with it, but I've been told to leave it with you. And she put the money in my hand and, thanked me again, and she went about her way. And so I'm sitting in the car, sweating like a madman, but at the same time, I'm just so blown away at how God provided my need at the exact time that I needed it. Even though I didn't want to take it, he wouldn't allow me to be in self. He made her give it to me. And so I was just blown away at that point, by his goodness and his ability to provide for my needs. So I used that $20 to get home, and I made it all the way home. And literally, as I'm pulling in the driveway, AT&T calls back and says, hey, can you be here tomorrow to do a drug test and start your first day? Now, in my mind, I'm excited, but then I'm like, I barely made it home from the interview, much less coming right back the next day to start my first day and do my drug test and everything. So I'm freaking out because the opportunity is there now, but how do I accept it? So, I was sitting there thinking about it, and it was like, man, if I did it once for you, do you not think I know you need it again? I'll do it a second time, and I'll do it a third time. If you're willing to go, I'll go ahead of you and make sure that you're taken care of. So, I'm excited. I'm calling my family and telling them, hey, I got a good job. I start tomorrow. I don't know how I'm going to make this thing work, but I'm just going to go do it. So one of one of my cousins heard about it, and she called me. She said, "Hey, I don't have much." She's like, "But you can get this last $20 that I got." And she said, "Just come down here and get it. If I'm not home, I'll leave it with my mother, and you can have it and start your day." Now, I know y'all thinking, dang, that family is poor. Everybody only has $20, but it wasn't about my family or what we have or what we don't have. It was about the love and the ability and the willingness to share what little we had to make the next person great, which that was, even though we were not rich in money, we were rich in love, and that made us rich. That made us wealthy. So I went and got that $20, and the next day, I took off. I headed back to Birmingham with no expectation of coming back. I packed enough clothes to last for a week or so, and I took off. So I had a bigger problem at that point. I was trying to figure out, like, where am I going to stay for a week? Am I going to sleep in the car at a truck stop or what? I've got to figure this thing out. So as I'm driving back to Birmingham the next day, I stop about halfway, and I pull over at this truck stop, and they've got the Apartment Guides, the magazine. So I'm flipping through there trying to find some apartments in my budget of $0 that I could afford, and I found this one apartment. I called several, and then I got to this one apartment complex, and it looked like it was where I was supposed to be. So I called the lady up as I'm driving, and she answers the phone, and I proceeded to start the call off like this. I said, "Good morning. Without a doubt, this will be the weirdest phone call you probably have ever had from a future resident, but I need an apartment, and I don't have the first month rent. I don't have the last month rent. I don't have the security deposit, nor can I get the utilities put in my name. But I need an apartment, and I need it today." And the lady laughed on the phone. She was like, "Yes, sir. That is the craziest phone call I've ever gotten about an apartment. But let me call you back." And I thought that "let me call you back" was code for "get off my phone, boy, stop playing with my time." So I proceeded to drive, get to Birmingham, get to the AT&T location, and get all the paperwork to go get my physical done and my drug screen, and drive across town, get that done. I make my way back to the AT&T location for this orientation session. So I'm literally sitting in the orientation about an hour into it. It's about noon time, right at noon, probably 30 minutes before noon, and I get a phone call. So I step out of the room to take the call, and it was the lady from the apartment complex. She said, "Mr. Hurd, this will probably be the weirdest phone call that you'll receive today, but when you go on your lunch break, come and get your key to your apartment, and you don't have to worry about getting the utilities changed over right now, and just pay the security deposit when you get it." And I was literally standing in the hallway at the job, about to break down in tears, because I couldn't believe how faithful God was, to me in my time of need. I was literally, I had nothing, no way to provide for myself, no way to even get a hotel room for the night if I wanted to. And so literally, when I went on my lunch break, I drove around the corner to the apartment complex, and I picked up my key, and I had nothing in that apartment. I had not a bed. I mean, even if, looking back at it, the mattress that I slept on in the abandoned house was more than I had at this apartment. Even though I had, better, a better environment, I didn't even have a bed to sleep on. So I literally took the clothes that I had, and, I balled them up to make me a pillow, and I laid on the floor for almost 2 weeks, I made that work. I could take a shower. I was clean. I was able to go to work every day. But I literally slept on the floor in this apartment with nothing in it for 2 weeks. And so, I worked long enough to get my first paycheck. So, I had gas money. I could start to function again. During that 2 weeks, I counted it. I knew it was 14 days. I've got a little money left out of the $20 that my cousin gave me, that I had to make it on for that long period of time. So I literally bought 2 packs of hot dogs and a loaf of bread. I didn't even get hot dog buns. A loaf of bread I knew I could eat 14 days. I could eat 14 hot dogs, and that's how I made it through those 2 weeks until I got paid. And although it wasn't the healthiest meal, it got me through. It got me to payday. And so during that time, my dad had called me. He said, "Hey, son, I know you don't have a bed or anything in that apartment." He's like, "Just, come home." And a friend of mine said that he's got a bed that you could stay in, you could get, and at least you'll have a bed to sleep on. So literally, I drive home that Friday night, and that Saturday morning, I get up to go meet his friend to get this bed. And so I pull up to the house that he told me to come to. Now, this house is grown up. It probably hadn't been lived in 15 or 20 years. It was worse than the house that I lived in prior. But the good thing was I was not too prideful. Like, it didn't set me back, the condition of that house, because I knew the one that I had just left. So, I went in. I said, if there's a bed in there, I'm gonna go get it. And it was an antique bed. It was solid wood. It was really nice, but it was covered in about 15, 20 years worth of dust and spider webs. And I took it home, cleaned it up, and loaded it on the truck and took it to Birmingham. My dad let me use his truck. I swapped my mom's car out for my dad's truck, took it back to Birmingham, set the bed up, and I was all set. I was not sleeping on the floor anymore, and that was a step up. So now I'm working for AT&T, and I'm going to these customers' houses, and I'm setting up internet and TV service and all of this. So I'm meeting people along the way, and I meet a customer, and as I'm going in the house, I see all of these TVs in their garage, and I asked her I said, "Hey, what are you doing with all those TVs?" And she was like, "I'm waiting for the Salvation Army to come pick them up. We're going to donate them and just give them away and get them out of the house." I said, "Do you mind if I take one?" She's like, "Yeah, take that big one right there, and you can have it." So, I told her I'd come back after work, pick the TV up, and I did. And that's how I got a TV in my blank apartment to start watching some form of TV. And so, as things are progressing, things are getting better. I end up working that job for a little over a year and a half, and it was steady. Everything was steady. I was able to take care of myself, provide for my kids, pick them up every other weekend, and provide some form of normal for them as far as our entertainment and stuff. So I would literally work till like 8, 9 o'clock at night on Saturday, and then drive 3 hours to pick them up. I would get to their house sometimes 11 o'clock, midnight sometimes, and then turn around and drive 3 hours back to Birmingham. And I would make it home sometimes 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, and I would have to be up for work at 6. So I would get like 3 hours of sleep, be up for work, work all day. Meanwhile, the boys were at my apartment, and I would work 12, 13 hours, get off, spend some time with them, go to the movies or out to eat or something. And I did that Saturday night, and then Sunday I would have to take them back And I would do the same thing, 3 hours there, 3 hours back, get 3 hours of sleep, and be at work the next morning. So that was literally my life for the next 2.5 years. It was no sleep. It was just sacrifice. I knew what my boys meant to me, and regardless of what I had to go through to go get them, it didn't matter how tired I was or how hot it was. I was going to go. Like, it would be so hot some days, and the car didn't have an air conditioner. It had a great heater, but it didn't have an air conditioner. It would be so hot, like I would have to drive down the road in my boxers. That's how hot it was. That was the only way to stay alive and drink plenty of water so I could, be alert enough to make that drive. But that's what I was willing to do every weekend, because they were that important to me. I wasn't going to let inconvenience keep me from spending time with them. So I literally did that for the next year and a half. Right at 2 years, I consistently made that drive. And on that topic, so part of the way through that, I started having some problems with the car. It was high mileage. So I went over to Enterprise, and, I would start to rent a car from them on the weekend just to drive and go pick the boys up so they would be more comfortable. And, after doing that, 4 or 5 times, the manager of Enterprise asked me, hey, why you come here every week to get a car? Like, what's going on? Do you want to buy the car? We have a sales department where you can buy a car if you'd like one, but you're spending a lot of money to rent a car. And, I told him at the time I'm not able to buy a car. Financially, I wasn't in the best place to take on any more debt. So, he told me, he said, I'm going to do you I'm going to do something for you because I respect the fact that you go get your boys that consistent. He said, when I was growing up, I wanted my dad to come get me, and he never showed up. He said, so because you do show up, I'm going to give you this preferred rate. It's the lowest rate we offer. I literally was paying like $20 for the weekend to rent cars from Enterprise. And, he was such a fan of my story that he was like, pick any car that you want. He said, I don't care if it's a luxury car, a truck, whatever, you get it, you can drive it. And that's what I did, so I started to elevate from driving those small cars to driving BMWs and Mercedes, going to pick my boys up. And, I was just blessed that, he asked why I was doing that, why I was renting those cars every weekend. And, he blessed he literally blessed my consistency. He blessed my willingness to spend time with my kids. And that really helped me financially be able to continue to do that. So, divorces are messy. So during that time, there was money just taken out of my bank account. I don't want to rehash old memories, but the money was there, and then the next day it wasn't there. So to the sum of about $20,000. And so one day I get a call from my neighbor, and she said, Pat, you've got some mail that was put in my mailbox, and it looks like some checks, and I'm not for sure. She's like, but I'm going to hold it until you get off work, and you just, knock on my door when you get here and pick it up. So when I got off work, I was thinking it was probably one of those sweepstakes checks, or one of those checks they send when they want you to come buy a car, the ones that are not really checks, but they're kind of like the bait to get you down to the car dealership. So I had no expectations that it was anything real. So when I got off work, I went and knocked on her door, and she gave me my mail. And once I got in my apartment, I opened the first one, and sure enough, it was a check. And I opened the second one, it was a check for the same amount as the first one. So I opened the third one, and you guessed it, it was a check too. So I'm sitting there and I add these checks up, and they total the amount that was taken from my checking account. So I'm sitting there just blown away at that point. Like this is starting to get creepy now. Like every dollar that I lost was given back to me. I'm speechless at that point. I'm sitting there looking at these checks, and the skepticism kicked in. So I'm like, these can't be real checks. So I call Bank of America. I'm like, hey, are these real? And they were like, yeah, the 3 homes that you foreclosed on, we sold those properties, and this is the proceeds that were due because of that sale. And I'm just sitting there blown away at how something as painful as a foreclosure became a blessing to me later on, like 2 years later. To be able to receive that kind of money in my time of need was like the biggest game changer for me financially. And I was just sitting there just blown away at how good God is to me and to us, to all of us. So I get back to work the next day, and they're like, Pat, you've been doing such a good job. We have an opportunity to promote you if you're interested in it. So I'm just sitting there speechless, because this is the kind of week I've had. Like, I'm so used to bad things happening to me at that point that I'm just in disbelief at the amount of good things that are happening now. So I was like, of course I want the promotion. And I literally got promoted that following week, and went from being a technician to being a manager of technicians. And I was just sitting there seeing how God was elevating me, and I thought back to that voice that I heard when I was in that abandoned house, and it said that I'm going to restore you even better than you were before. And I was just, people were talking to me, and I was like zoned out. I was just so connected to that voice that I heard, that I was kind of like in this space where I couldn't hear anything. I could see things moving, but I couldn't hear anything. Everything was like muted out, because I'm just focused on how good of a place I'm in at this particular point in my life. And just really thankful for the journey that I was on. I'm thankful that I received the message to not lose my mind. I'm thankful that I had the upbringing from my family. We went through hard times, so hard times don't break me. I just have to figure my way through them. And having that upbringing, it was nothing to sleep on the floor. It was nothing to sleep in an abandoned house. It was nothing to sleep in or to take a bath in a rusted out bathtub. It was nothing to take a bath in the sink. It was nothing to eat hot dogs for 2 weeks. It was nothing to drive with my gas light on. I just knew that I was going to make it through if I could hold on. And I was just really blown away at that point. I was really thankful. I'm more so thankful now that I have the space, the mental peace to be able to share this with you. Some of you guys may be going through some rough times right now. You may be going through a season of, not knowing how you're going to get your next meal, or pay your rent payment that's coming up, or the car note is behind, and, everything's closing in on you. But I can say this with experience, that you're not alone. All of this stuff is temporary anyway. So, the old saying is that God gives and he takes away. So I used to hang on to that, with comfort. The things that were being taken from me was God taking them from me, because he wanted to either replace them, or they were not good for me anyway. So that helped me get through those moments where I was losing the things that I had acquired because I was fully expecting him to replace them with things that were of higher quality. And that's exactly what he did. Fast forward several years later, I was able to build my home, from the ground up. God blessed me to be able to do that. And it's a home that's way better than the home that I had before. So his word is true. His voice is proven to me that it doesn't matter what you lose. As long as you don't lose him, you haven't really lost anything, because he is my all in all. And I pray that he's your all in all too. And if he is your all in all, nothing that you lose is really lost forever. So that's part 2 to the story, Back Against the Wall. I have a part 3 that I'll share in a later date that details how everything transformed for me, how I was able to build a home and really be taken to the next level in my life. So with that, I'll conclude. Thank you guys for taking the time to listen to my story again, and I hope it's been a blessing to you. God bless.